Have you ever been subjected to humiliation purely due to the color of your skin? And what if, to compound the indignity, this occurred while you were simply attempting to procure a gift for the woman you hold dearest in life? This precise scenario unfolded for Darius, a 16-year-old black youth who, with a heartfelt aspiration, stepped into an upscale jewelry boutique only to be escorted out by police, treated as if he were a common criminal. Yet what no one anticipated was that a single unassuming detail would irrevocably alter the narrative, ultimately unveiling a truth that sent shivers of remorse through his accusers. This narrative transcends a mere cautionary tale. It is a profound and unvarnished dose of reality, and the indelible lesson it imparts is destined to resonate with you for a considerable time. Darius Parker's heart throbbed as he pushed open the gleaming glass door of the most elegant watch emporium in downtown Chicago. 16 years old, his sneakers well-worn, his jacket unadorned, yet his eyes held a singular determination rarely seen in teenagers. The metallic chime of the bell echoed through the opulent space, shattering the profound silence that had previously enveloped the premises. Display cases glittered under perfectly positioned LED lights, gold, silver, and diamond-encrusted timepieces, each item commanding a price greater than his mother's earnings in half a year as a nurse. But Darius was not there to merely gaze and dream. He was there to acquire. 6 arduous months washing cars beneath Chicago's scorching sun. 6 months of waking at 5 in the morning on weekends. 6 months meticulously saving every last cent, carefully stashing every crumpled bill, every soap-stained coin, all culminating in this singular moment. All for the radiant smile he envisioned gracing his mother's face when he presented the birthday gift she so profoundly deserved. The store was deserted, utterly empty. Only he and the sales associate remained behind the main counter. A middle-aged Caucasian woman with immaculately coiffed blonde hair and impeccably manicured red nails. This was Mrs. Whitmore. She looked up as Darius entered, and a subtle yet unmistakable shift occurred in her expression. Darius advanced with a resolute stride down the central aisle, observing the displayed pieces. He knew precisely what he sought. He had meticulously researched for weeks, committing every detail and specification to memory. A classic, elegant timepiece, truly befitting a woman who diligently toiled 12 hours a day to single-handedly sustain her family. "Good afternoon," he uttered, approaching the counter with the upright posture his mother had always instilled in him. Mrs. Whitmore did not respond immediately. Her gaze meticulously swept over Darius from head to toe, scrutinizing every aspect of his unassuming jacket. His sneakers had undeniably seen better days. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "May I help you?" she inquired, though her tone was imbued with a palpable chill. "I'm seeking a particular timepiece," Darius responded, maintaining a composed and courteous tone. "I saw it in your online catalog. It's a classic gold model with a brown leather strap." He described the item with meticulous detail, specifying the exact model, the brand, even the reference number he had committed to memory. Mrs. Whitmore furrowed her brow, as if incredulous that he possessed such intricate knowledge of luxury timepieces. "That model costs $3,500, she stated, enunciating each word distinctly. "Are you certain you're in the proper establishment?" The question was laden with thinly veiled insinuation. Darius felt a flush rise to his cheeks, yet he maintained his composure. He took a deep breath and reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. "I possess the funds," he asserted, withdrawing a meticulously folded envelope. "Partially in cash, partially on my debit card." Mrs. Whitmore's expression underwent a complete transformation. The strained smile vanished, supplanted by a countenance of unadulterated suspicion. She recoiled a step, as if Darius posed an imminent threat. "From where would a young man such as yourself procure such a sum?" The question emerged with more aggression than she likely intended. "By honest labor," Darius replied succinctly. "I've been washing cars for 6 months to purchase a gift for my mother." But Mrs. Whitmore was no longer listening. Her gaze fixated first on the envelope in Darius's hand, then on his backpack, before snapping back to his countenance. An unmistakable paranoia contorted her features. "You're aware we have surveillance cameras, aren't you?" she uttered, her voice quivering slightly. The query caught Darius completely off guard. Cameras? What possible relevance did that bear to purchasing a timepiece? "Of course," he responded, bewildered. "Why do you ask?" Mrs. Whitmore offered no reply. Instead, she retreated several more paces, positioning herself nearer to the store's rear wall. Darius discerned that she was strategically distancing herself, creating a significant space between them. "I shall fetch the manager," she announced, yet made no move toward any office. Instead, she seized the store's telephone and proceeded to dial a number. Darius could not discern the entirety of the conversation, yet he caught unsettling fragments. "Yes, a young man, suspicious. It might be best to send someone." Suspicious? Darius felt a knot form in his stomach. He was merely attempting to purchase a gift for his mother. What was so suspicious about that? Ms. Whitmore disconnected the call and retreated behind the counter, but maintained her distance. Her gaze remained fixed on Darius, scrutinizing his every movement as though she expected him to make a false step at any moment. The ensuing silence was stifling. Darius stood motionless in the center of the store, the envelope still clutched in his hand, struggling to comprehend the unfolding situation. The atmosphere had shifted entirely. What began as a straightforward commercial transaction had morphed into something far more ominous. He looked around, noticing details he had previously overlooked. The surveillance cameras strategically placed in the ceiling corners. Ms. Whitmore's calculated stance, the way she gripped the phone, as though poised to make another call at any given moment. "How much longer will this take?" he asked, endeavoring to puncture the palpable tension. "Not long," she replied, but there was an underlying tone in her voice that implied otherwise. Darius tucked the envelope back into his pocket and folded his arms. He resolved to wait. He had toiled too diligently, economized for too extended a period, and harbored this dream for far too long to relinquish it now. His mother merited that gift, and he was not about to depart the establishment without securing it. But as he waited, a peculiar sensation began to coalesce in the recesses of his mind. Something was amiss, profoundly so. The intensity of Ms. Whitmore's gaze was far from customary. The chill in her voice transcended mere discourtesy. It bespoke something far more profound, more perilous. His thoughts drifted to his mother, toiling at the hospital at that very instant, tending to patients, preserving lives, effecting tangible change in the world. He reflected on the countless times she had returned home utterly spent, yet invariably summoning the energy to inquire about his day, to assist with his homework, to bestow the unconditional affection only a mother can provide. That timepiece would be impeccably suited for her. Elegant, timeless, truly befitting a woman who had made such considerable sacrifices on his behalf. Darius was oblivious to the fact that, within the ensuing minutes, his life would undergo a permanent transformation. He was unaware that the mere endeavor to purchase a gift would transmute into a profound lesson on prejudice, power dynamics, and the critical imperative of self-knowledge. Ms. Whitmore returned to the phone. This time the exchange was protracted and conducted in hushed tones. Darius managed to discern only fragments, yet sufficient to send a distinct chill down his spine. "Yes, he's still here. I'm unsure what he's contemplating. Better safe than sorry." The chime above the door resounded once more. Darius turned around, expecting to see the manager enter. Instead, he saw something that made his heart pound. Two uniformed officers crossed the threshold, their hands instinctively positioned near their holsters. Mrs. Whitmore frowned and whispered one last sentence into the phone that would echo in Darius's mind for the next few minutes. "I believe we have a problem on our hands here." Officer Barnes entered first, a middle-aged white man with broad shoulders and an expression that suggested years of dealing with tense situations. Behind him came Officer Cruz, a younger Latina woman with eyes that seemed to capture every detail of the environment in seconds. Darius felt the world slow down around him. The sound of his heartbeats echoed in his ears like war drums. The store lights seemed brighter, the colors more intense. Every movement of the officers seemed to occur in slow motion. "Good afternoon, officers," Mrs. Whitmore said, and there was genuine relief in her voice. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Officer Barnes nodded, and his eyes immediately fixed on Darius. Not on the expensive display cases, not on Mrs. Whitmore, straight on Darius. "What's the situation?" Barnes asked, but he kept looking at the teenager. "This young man came in saying he wants to buy a $3,500 watch," Mrs. Whitmore explained, as if that were automatically suspicious. "He said he has the money, but, well, you can see for yourselves." Barnes walked slowly toward Darius, each step echoing on the marble floor. Officer Cruz remained near the door, blocking the exit. The protocol was clear. Surround the suspect. "What's your name, son?" Barnes asked, stopping a few feet from Darius. "Darius Parker," he replied, keeping his voice steady despite his growing nervousness. "And what exactly are you here for?" "To buy a watch for my mother." Darius repeated the explanation he had already given. "It's her birthday next week." Barnes exchanged a look with Mrs. Whitmore. There was a silent communication between them, an understanding that completely excluded Darius from the conversation. "Where did you get that much money?" The question came, laden with suspicion. "Working," Darius replied, but he realized his voice sounded defensive even as he tried to remain calm. "I wash cars on weekends. I saved up for 6 months." "Car washes," Barnes repeated, as if testing the veracity of the assertion. "Where?" "At the Maple Street parking lot." Darius provided the specific address. "Mr. Rodriguez lets me work there." Officer Cruz jotted something down in her notepad. Darius realized that every word he uttered was being recorded, scrutinized, judged. He was being treated like a criminal, and he didn't even know why. "May I see that money?" Barnes extended his hand. Darius hesitated. There was nothing illegal about carrying cash, but the way the question was phrased sounded more like a command than a request. Slowly, he pulled the envelope from his pocket. "Slowly," Barnes instructed, his hand instinctively moving towards his holster. The envelope was meticulously organized, 20, 50, and $100 bills, neatly bundled with rubber bands. Darius had counted that money hundreds of times, dreaming of this moment. Now in the officer's hands, it looked like evidence of some crime he hadn't committed. Barnes scrutinized each bill as if searching for some suspicious mark. Mrs. Whitmore watched intently, arms crossed, a poorly concealed expression of satisfaction on her face. "That's a substantial sum for a teenager," Barnes commented. "Are you sure it came from washing cars?" "Absolutely," Darius replied, but he felt his word held no currency in that environment. "And the card?" Barnes pointed to the debit card tucked in with the money. "It's my debit card," Darius explained. "I opened the account to keep the money safe." Barnes examined the card as if it were a crucial clue. He read the name printed on the front, frowning as he found something that caught his attention. "Darius Jordan Parker," he read aloud. "Jordan? It's my mother's maiden name," Darius explained. "She's Angela Jordan Parker." Officer Cruz looked up from her notepad. There was something familiar about that surname, but she couldn't quite place it. "Where does your mother work?" Barnes continued the interrogation. "At Chicago General Hospital," Darius responded. "She's a nurse in the emergency department." "And your father?" The question hit Darius like a punch to the gut. His expression shifted momentarily, a shadow of pain crossing his young eyes. "I don't have a father," he said, his voice slightly subdued. "It's just me and my mother." Mrs. Whitmore chuckled softly, a cruel sound that reverberated through the store. It was as if the absence of a paternal figure merely lent credence to her suspicions about Darius. "He clearly doesn't," she murmured, yet her voice carried, audible to all present. Darius felt a mortifying flush creep up his face. The humiliation outweighed the fear, more profound even than his bewilderment. He had walked into the shop as a legitimate customer, with money earned through honest labor. Yet now he found himself treated like a criminal. But why? Was it for being black? For being young? Or for daring to aspire to purchase something of significant value? "I'm going to need to search your backpack," Barnes declared. "Why?" Darius inquired, a flicker of defiance entering his voice for the very first time. "Standard procedure," Barnes retorted, offering no clarification as to what it was standard for. Darius glanced at Officer Cruz, searching for any indication that she might question the protocol. She averted her gaze, visibly discomfited by the situation. yet lacking the fortitude to intervene. Reluctantly, Darius unslung his backpack and handed it over to Barnes. The officer unzipped the main compartment and began to systematically remove its contents one by one. School notebooks, pens, a carefully wrapped sandwich his mother had prepared for him, anticipating a potential onset of hunger. A photograph of her in a nurse's uniform, her smile radiant for the camera despite having just completed a grueling 12-hour shift. Barnes scrutinized each item, as though meticulously searching for contraband or weaponry. Darius's humiliation compounded with every passing second. He reflected on the countless times he had witnessed similar scenarios unfold on television, invariably contemplating how it would feel to be the subject of such a search. Now he knew. He felt diminished, utterly powerless, reduced to a mere stereotype. "Who is this?" Barnes inquired, holding up the photograph of Darius's mother. "My mother," Darius replied, striving to imbue his voice with a semblance of dignity. "Angela Jordan Parker," Barnes read aloud, noting the name inscribed on the back of the photo, where Darius had penned a tender dedication. The surname Jordan continued to nag at Officer Cruz. She recognized the name from somewhere, yet its origin eluded her. It was akin to having a word poised on the tip of her tongue, yet being unable to articulate it. Mrs. Whitmore edged closer to the counter, evidently relishing the unfolding spectacle. To her mind, this was unequivocal confirmation that she had been entirely justified in summoning the police. A black teenager possessing such a significant sum of money could only portend trouble. Barnes continued his methodical search of the backpack, scattering its contents across the polished marble counter. Each of Darius's personal effects was laid bare, meticulously scrutinized, and implicitly judged. The intensely personal nature of the situation was profoundly degrading. "Where did you state you reside?" Barnes inquired, taking a piece of paper with the school address. "South Side," Darius replied, and witnessed Barnes's expression harden further. Chicago's South Side. For numerous individuals, this address instantly conjured associations of crime, narcotics, and violence. It mattered not that Darius was an exemplary student. It mattered not that his mother was a respected professional. The zip code alone sufficed to foster prejudice. "Quite a distance to come purchase a watch," Barnes commented, as if residing in the South Side served as evidence of culpability. "It's home to the city's finest watch store," Darius responded, and there was pride in his voice despite the demeaning situation. He had researched for weeks, compared prices, read reviews. He desired the best for his mother, and that entailed journeying downtown, even knowing he would be the sole black individual in the store. Barnes finished searching the backpack and began replacing the items, albeit carelessly. The notebooks were tossed haphazardly, the pens rolled across the counter. His mother's photograph nearly tumbled to the floor. "Careful," Darius said instinctively, extending his hand to shield the photograph. "Do not move," Barnes commanded, his voice imbued with authority. Darius froze, his hands still outstretched, observing his mother's photograph being carelessly mishandled by a stranger. In that moment, he comprehended that he was not perceived as a human being with sentiments, with family, with aspirations. He was merely a suspect. Officer Cruz observed everything in silence, clearly discomfited. She had become an officer to protect and serve the community, but what she was witnessing there resembled neither protection nor service. It appeared to be harassment. Barnes held the debit card again, scrutinizing the name with greater attention. "Angela Jordan Parker," he murmured as if attempting to decipher a code. Officer Cruz approached, finally yielding to the curiosity that plagued her. "May I see?" she requested, extending her hand for the card. Barnes passed the card to her. Cruz examined the name meticulously, her brow furrowed. There was undeniably something familiar about it, but she couldn't quite pinpoint it. "Jordan?" she murmured to herself. "Why does that name resonate with me?" Darius observed her expression shift gradually. It was akin to watching someone assemble a jigsaw puzzle, piece by piece, until the image began to coalesce. "Wait," Cruz uttered slowly, looking directly at Darius. "Jordan? As in Michael Jordan?" For a fleeting moment, the world seemed to halt. Darius held her gaze, Observing the gradual dawning of comprehension in her eyes, Barnes ceased rummaging through his backpack. Even Mrs. Whitmore, for the first time since the officer's arrival, seemed to lend her full attention to the conversation. "Yes," Darius responded simply, his voice calm, yet imbued with a gravity no one in the room had yet fully grasped. The silence that ensued Officer Barnes's query was deafening. Darius could hear the frantic thudding of his own heart, each pulse reverberating in his ears like a war drum. The store's fluorescent lights seemed to intensify, appearing brighter, more unforgiving, laying bare every nuance of the humiliation that was about to escalate. "My mother," Darius replied, maintaining a steady voice despite the tempest of emotions raging within him. "Angela Jordan Parker is my mother." Barnes scrutinized the card once more, as if the letters might betray some latent, arcane secret. The distrust discernible in his eyes did not abate. Conversely, it appeared to have escalated. "Jordan," he reiterated slowly, testing the name on his tongue. "And what is the provenance of that surname?" "It's my mother's maiden name," Darius clarified, acutely aware that his every utterance was being meticulously scrutinized and weighed. "She retained it upon her marriage, and subsequently, well, after it was just me and her." Officer Cruz maintained that peculiar expression, as if grappling with a significant memory. The name Jordan reverberated in her mind like a familiar melody on the radio that she couldn't quite place. "Does your mother have siblings?" Barnes queried, a distinct shift in his tone now evident. Not less hostile, but undeniably more probing. "Yes," Darius responded, uncertain of the trajectory this line of questioning was taking. "How many?" "Two brothers," Darius divulged the information with palpable reluctance. He didn't understand why his genealogical background was pertinent to purchasing a watch. Mrs. Whitmore observed everything with mounting fascination. There was something unfolding that she didn't fully comprehend, but she could discern the qualitative shift in the tension. It was no longer merely about a suspicious teenager. Deeper strata were being unveiled. Barnes exchanged a glance with Officer Cruz. She nodded slightly, confirming she also sensed there was more to the story. "What are their names?" Barnes pressed. Darius hesitated. His family had always been fiercely private regarding their connections, particularly concerning one of his uncles. His mother had always asserted that certain matters were best kept private, believing that a family member's renown should not define their individual identities. "Why does that matter?" Darius asked, attempting to grasp the relevance of the question. "Answer the question," Barnes commanded, his authority reasserting itself in his voice. Darius took a deep breath. There was no reason to conceal it, merely a preference for privacy his mother had cultivated in him since childhood. "One is named Marcus," he said. "The other is Michael." The reaction was instantaneous. Officer Cruz's eyes widened, comprehension finally dawning with sudden clarity. Barnes furrowed his brow, still not entirely connecting the dots, yet sensing he was on the precipice of a significant revelation. "Michael Jordan," Cruz murmured, more to herself than to the others. "Which Michael Jordan?" Barnes demanded, irked at being deprived of crucial information. "The basketball player," Cruz replied, her voice laced with escalating incredulity. "Michael Jordan, the basketball player." Mrs. Whitmore let out a scathing, sarcastic laugh, a sound that sliced through the air like a blade. "Naturally," she retorted, the words dripping with undisguised contempt. "And I'm related to Oprah Winfrey." Barnes glanced from Darius to Cruz, still endeavoring to assimilate the information. "Are you saying this kid is related to Michael Jordan?" he asked, his voice laced with palpable skepticism. "I'm not saying anything," Cruz replied guardedly. "I'm just connecting information." Darius watched the conversation unfold around him, feeling like a mere spectator in his own life. It was always like this whenever his uncle's name surfaced. People would become skeptical, then curious, then obsessive. That was why his mother always insisted on maintaining their privacy. "Is it true?" Barnes asked Darius directly. "Is Michael Jordan your uncle?" "Yes," Darius replied simply, without elaborating. The silence that followed was unlike any before it. It was no longer the silence of tension or distrust. It was the silence of shock, of disbelief, of a world turned upside down. Barnes picked up the card again, studying the name with a new perspective. Angela Jordan Parker. If she was Michael Jordan's sister, if this boy truly was the nephew of the man many considered the greatest basketball player of all time, prove it, Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice cutting through the silence. Anyone can claim to be related to someone famous. Darius looked at her, seeing the raw, unvarnished prejudice etched onto her face. Even with the possibility that he was who he claimed to be, she still couldn't accept that she had misjudged the situation. I don't need to prove anything, Darius replied, a newfound dignity in his voice. I came here to buy a watch for my mother, not to discuss my family. But Barnes was not about to let the matter drop. If there was even a remote chance that the boy was indeed Michael Jordan's nephew, he needed to be certain. The implications of having mistreated the nephew of one of America's most revered personalities were terrifying. Do you have a way to prove it? Barnes asked, his tone far more respectful than it had been moments earlier. I do, Darius replied, pulling his phone from his pocket. He opened his photo gallery and began scrolling through the images. Family photos, some taken at special events, others in casual moments. He stopped on a specific photo. Darius, his mother, and a tall, clearly recognizable man, all smiling at the camera at a family barbecue. Barnes and Cruz leaned in to see the photo. Officer Cruz was the first to react, her mouth parting slightly in surprise. My God, she whispered. It really is him. Barnes scrutinized the photo, meticulously comparing the man's face in the image with his recollections of the famous player. There was no doubt. It was Michael Jordan, in the flesh, his arm around Darius's shoulders, beaming like any proud uncle would. Mrs. Whitmore craned her neck to see the photo, her expression shifting dramatically as she recognized the man in the image. The blood drained from her face, leaving her visibly ashen. That's she stammered, unable to complete the sentence. My Uncle Michael, Darius said calmly, pocketing his cell phone. As I said, it's my mother's birthday, and I came to buy her a gift. The atmosphere in the store shifted entirely. What had begun as suspicion and hostility had morphed into something far more complex. Barnes and Cruz exchanged nervous glances, clearly realizing they had made a colossal blunder. Listen, kid, Barnes began, his voice significantly softer now. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot here. Perhaps, Darius echoed, and a newfound resolve resonated in his voice. You've treated me like a criminal from the moment you walked in here. You searched my backpack, questioned every penny I honestly earned, humiliated me in front of a stranger, all because I wanted to buy my mother a gift. The truth of Darius's words struck everyone in the room like a gut punch. Officer Cruz lowered her gaze, visibly mortified. Barnes ran a hand through his hair, comprehending the full magnitude of his actions. We were just following protocol. Barnes attempted to justify himself, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Protocol for what? Darius inquired, his voice imbued with an authority he hadn't possessed 10 minutes prior. For a black teenager with money? For someone from the South Side who dares to enter an expensive store? Mrs. Whitmore attempted to recede behind the counter, realizing her decision to call the police had spiraled into a nightmare. She had assumed the worst about Darius based solely on his appearance and background, and now faced the stark repercussions of her prejudices. Darius looked around the store, viewing the situation through a transformed lens. He was no longer a helpless teenager being intimidated by authorities. He was Michael Jordan's nephew, and that revelation changed everything. Officer Cruz was the first to attempt to de-escalate the situation. She stowed her notepad and took a few steps toward Darius, her hands visible, a gesture of peace. Darius, she said softly, I'm truly sorry how this unfolded. Sometimes in our line of work, we end up being overly cautious. Overly cautious, Darius repeated the words, savoring the irony. Is that what you call racial profiling now? The ensuing silence was awkward. Barnes shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Darius's direct gaze. Mrs. Whitmore seemed to have shrunk behind the counter, as if she could make herself invisible. It was then that the sound of rapid footsteps echoed from outside the shop. Determined, multiple footsteps, approaching quickly. Darius recognized the sound. It was the kind of commotion that always accompanied his uncle when he appeared in public. Barnes and Cruz turned toward the door, furrowing their brows at the voices outside. There was a growing agitation, as if a crowd was forming on the sidewalk. "What's going on out there?" Barnes murmured to Cruz. Before she could answer, the shop door burst open. A mall security guard rushed in, his face flushed from exertion, clearly agitated. "Officers," he said, almost breathless. "There's a man out here. He looks like Michael Jordan." The air in the shop became electrified. Barnes and Cruz exchanged quick glances, the weight of the realization hitting them like a tidal wave. The mall security guard remained by the door, breathing heavily, his eyes flicking between the officers and Darius. "He's asking for a kid named Darius," the guard continued, his voice trembling slightly. "Said he got a call that his nephew was having trouble at a watch store." Darius closed his eyes for a moment, recognizing the pattern. His mother had always said Michael had a sixth sense for these things. When something happened with family, he just knew. "Is he alone?" Cruz asked the security guard. "No, ma'am," the guard replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "He's got at least 4 private security guards with him, and a crowd's already forming out there. People are pulling out their cell phones, taking pictures. It's a situation." Mrs. Whitmore emerged from behind the counter for the first time since the trouble began, moving like someone in a state of shock. She approached the front display window, gazing through the glass at the sidewalk. "My God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's really him." Barnes moved closer to the window, followed by Cruz. Outside, a tall, unmistakably familiar figure conversed calmly with one of the mall's security guards, yet a palpable tension in his posture hinted at genuine concern. Michael Jordan wore an immaculate dark suit and possessed that commanding presence only true legends exude. Even in casual conversation, he commanded attention, radiating natural authority. "How did he know?" Barnes inquired, more to himself than to anyone specific. "My mother," Darius replied calmly. "She always told me to call if anything happened. I texted her when you arrived." The truth was simpler than anyone in the room had imagined. Darius had discreetly sent a quick message to his mother when the situation began to deteriorate. "Trouble at the watch store. Police here." Angela, knowing both her son and her brother, immediately called Michael. "He's coming in," the security guard warned, seeing Michael head for the store's entrance. Officer Cruz instinctively checked her uniform, smoothing out the creases, bracing herself to encounter one of America's most famous individuals. Barnes did the same, but there was panic in his eyes. He knew he had committed a terrible error, and now he would have to face the repercussions. Ms. Whitmore scurried back behind the counter, as if physical distance could shield her from what was about to unfold. Her hands trembled visibly as she attempted to organize papers that required no organization. The store door opened once more, but this time it was different. It was not the aggressive entry of the police officers or the haste of the security guard. It was calm, controlled, yet imbued with an authority that instantly permeated the entire space. Michael Jordan entered the store as if he owned the place. His eyes, shielded by dark glasses, swiftly scanned the environment, cataloging each person, every position, every detail of the situation. It was the same analytical gaze that had made him famous on the basketball courts, but now directed towards protecting his family. His eyes immediately found Darius, and genuine concern was supplanted by relief upon seeing that his nephew was physically unharmed. "Darius!" His voice echoed through the shop, clear and firm. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Uncle Mike," Darius replied, a genuine affection in his voice despite the tense situation. Michael nodded, but his eyes were already scanning, assessing the other individuals in the shop. He saw the police officers, their uniforms, their defensive postures. He saw the woman behind the counter, visibly panicked. He saw Darius's belongings strewn across the marble counter. "Would someone care to explain to me?" Michael said, his voice remaining calm, yet imbued with an authority that brooked no argument. "What exactly is transpiring here?" The silence stretched for several seconds. Barnes and Cruz exchanged glances, neither willing to be the first to speak. Mrs. Whitmore seemed to have completely lost the ability to articulate words. It was Darius who broke the silence. "I came to purchase a watch for my mother," he explained calmly. "I showed them the money I earned washing cars. That lady over there," he gestured towards Mrs. Whitmore, found it suspicious, and called the police. Michael listened to the explanation without interruption, but his expression gradually hardened. When Darius finished, Michael turned to the officers. "Officers," he said, his voice possessing that quality which commanded instant deference. "Has my nephew committed a crime?" "No, sir," Cruz replied swiftly. "No crime has been committed." "Then why has he been treated like a criminal?" Michael asked, gesturing to Darius's belongings scattered across the counter. Barnes attempted to formulate a response that wouldn't incriminate him, but he failed. The truth was palpable to everyone in the room. Darius had been racially profiled, pure and simple. "There was a misunderstanding," Barnes finally managed to utter. "A misunderstanding," Michael repeated the words slowly, as if savoring their inadequacy. "My nephew, an exemplary student, the son of a respected nurse, comes with honestly earned money to purchase a gift for his mother, and that is a misunderstanding." Every word was uttered with surgical precision, cutting through the excuses and rationalizations. Michael had confronted discrimination his entire life. Even after achieving fame, he knew how to recognize prejudice when he saw it, and he knew how to combat it. Mrs. Whitmore finally found her voice, attempting to defend herself. I was merely being cautious," she stammered. "A young man with so much cash, I thought." "What did you imagine, madam?" Michael interjected, his eyes boring into her with laser-like intensity. "That a black teenager couldn't possibly possess honest money? That someone from the South Side couldn't genuinely wish to purchase something beautiful for their mother?" The words struck Mrs. Whitmore like physical blows. She recoiled further, realizing there was no conceivable defense for her actions. I didn't mean to." She attempted to explain, but the words died in her throat. Michael turned back to the officers. "And you," he said, his voice laden with disappointment. "You arrived here and immediately presumed my nephew was guilty of something. You searched his belongings, interrogated him, humiliated him. On what grounds? On a call from a woman who saw a black teenager with money and instantly assumed the worst?" Barnes attempted to justify himself. "Mr. Jordan, we were merely following protocol." "Protocol," Michael interjected, the word a veritable curse. "What protocol permits you to treat a minor as a criminal without any evidence of a crime?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, because there was no satisfactory answer. What had transpired in the store was not protocol. It was institutionalized prejudice in action. Michael walked over to the counter where Darius's belongings were spread out. He picked up the photo of Angela, his sister, gazing at the image with palpable tenderness. "This is my sister," he said, showing the photo to everyone in the store. "Angela Jordan Parker. She works 12-hour days saving lives at the hospital. She raised this boy single-handedly, instilled in him values, hard work, and dignity. And today, when he sought to use the money he earned honestly to purchase a gift for her, he was treated like a delinquent." He carefully put away the photo and began collecting Darius's other belongings, meticulously returning them to his backpack. "This will not end here," Michael said, his voice low but laden with resolve. "I will not permit my nephew, or any other young person, to be treated in this manner." The mall security guard, who had remained by the door throughout the conversation, cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Jordan," he said, "the mall's general manager would like to speak with you, if you're amenable." Michael looked at Darius, who nodded discreetly. The teenager was all right, and now had the support he needed. "Inform the manager I'll be there in a few minutes," Michael responded. "First, I'm going to help my nephew purchase the gift for my sister." He pivoted towards Mrs. Whitmore, who appeared to have dwindled to half her usual stature. "Would someone care to elucidate what is transpiring here?" The very air in the shop shifted, literally, as if the oxygen itself had been supplanted by something denser, something suffused with power. The door chime still resonated as Michael Jordan strode across the threshold, and the entire world seemed to cant towards him. It wasn't merely his stature. It wasn't solely his renown. It was something more primal, more visceral. The unmistakable gravitas of someone who had confronted unimaginable pressures and emerged triumphant. Each step he took on the shop's frigid marble floor resonated like a judge's gavel descending upon the courtroom. Barnes felt a bead of sweat trace a path down his nape. Cruz swallowed audibly. Mrs. Whitmore cowered so profoundly behind the counter that she appeared to have physically diminished. Michael surveyed the scene with eyes that had witnessed millions clamoring his name, yet now were singularly fixed on one individual, his nephew. Darius remained standing, encircled by the scattered belongings on the floor, yet a subtle shift was discernible in his demeanor. No longer did he project the vulnerability of a defenseless youth. Instead, it was the stance of someone who had just been forcefully reminded of his true self. "Uncle Mike," Darius murmured, a profound sense of relief so palpable in his voice that it was almost painful to witness. Michael assented once, a gesture almost imperceptible, yet one that bore the full weight of a promise. "I shall now assume responsibility for everything." The ensuing silence was not vacuous. It was ponderous, pregnant with latent possibilities. Every individual in the shop understood that Michael Jordan's subsequent action would dictate not merely the resolution of that predicament, but potentially their own careers, their reputations, their very lives. "Would someone care to elucidate," Michael stated, his voice hushed yet incisive as fractured glass, "what precisely is transpiring with my nephew?" No one stirred. No one spoke. It was as if time itself had come to a standstill. Michael advanced another step into the store, the sharp crack of his shoes on the marble floor, reverberating like a clap of thunder. His gaze slowly swept over Darius's belongings, strewn across the floor. The overturned backpack, the dollar bills, the pay stubs, the entire tableau of a young, honest life laid bare, as if it were incriminating evidence. "Interesting," he murmured, stooping to retrieve one of the receipts. "Car wash, $65. He held the slip of paper between his fingers, scrutinizing it as though it were a historical artifact. "More car wash, $90, another receipt, $120. Each word resonated like a hammer blow against the pervasive silence. Michael slowly straightened up, the receipts still clutched in his hand. "My nephew is 16, he stated, his voice steadily gaining volume. "He works washing cars after school. He meticulously saves every cent. He came here today to purchase a birthday gift for his mother." A beat, a collective intake of breath. The crushing weight of a lifetime spent battling prejudice seemed to coalesce in that single instant. "And you treated him as a common criminal." Barnes attempted to step forward, but his legs felt as though they had turned to jelly. Cruz squeezed his eyes shut, as if he could unmake what had transpired simply by averting his gaze. "Officer Barnes," Michael intoned, his voice now edged with ice. "That is your name, is it not?" Barnes nodded mutely, rendered speechless. "When you observed my nephew enter this establishment, what was your immediate thought?" We received a call." "That was not my query." Michael advanced another step towards Barnes. "What was your initial thought when you encountered a young black man carrying a backpack?" The ensuing silence was deafening. Barnes's mouth opened, then closed, then opened once more. There was no conceivable answer he could offer that would not unequivocally condemn him. "Allow me to assist you," Michael continued, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You perceived a young black man and immediately presumed him to be a threat. It was irrelevant that he was courteously requesting to view an item. It was inconsequential that he possessed money. It was of no import that he was a minor. You observed the hue of his skin and unilaterally concluded his guilt." Each word was a projectile, each phrase an indictment. And Michael Jordan, the man who had confronted the most immense pressures in global sports, was merely beginning to unleash his full force. "And you," he pivoted, addressing Mrs. Whitmore, who was attempting to render herself imperceptible behind the counter. "You're the one who placed the call, aren't you?" Mrs. Whitmore shook her head frantically, as if she could deny reality itself. "You don't need to answer," Michael said. "I know it was you, because I know your kind. I know that look. I know the fear you harbor for us." He moved closer to the counter, and Mrs. Whitmore recoiled as if he were a predator. "My nephew is 16, he repeated, and now there was a tremor in his voice that was not fear, but suppressed fury. 16 years old. When I was 16, I was already being hounded for my color, followed by security guards in stores, questioned by police officers, treated as if my very existence were a threat. He placed his hands on the counter, leaning forward. 40 years later, and my nephew is still enduring the same experience. 40 years of success, of breaking down barriers, of being an exemplar, and nothing has changed. Nothing. Michael's voice was growing louder, more intense. Decades of pent-up frustration began to seep through the cracks of his usually impeccable composure. Do you have any idea how many times I've considered giving up? How many times I've simply wanted to stop? To cease trying to be an example? To cease trying to prove that we are more than you perceive us to be? Darius watched his uncle with a mix of awe and sorrow. He had never witnessed Michael Jordan, the icon, the hero, display such vulnerability. But I didn't give up, Michael continued, his voice growing steadier, because I knew there were young people like my nephew who would need someone who had opened doors, who would need someone who could stand beside them when they were judged by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character. He turned to Darius, and for a moment the hardness in his eyes softened. Darius, he said softly, did you do something wrong here? No, Uncle Mike. Did you disrespect anyone? No, sir. Did you do anything other than be a young black man with money? Darius shook his head, and there were tears in his eyes now. Not of sorrow, but of relief. Relief at finally having someone who saw him for who he truly was. Michael turned back to the others, and the harshness returned to his gaze. Then why is my nephew being humiliated in your store? Why are his belongings strewn across the floor as if he were a criminal? No one answered. No one could answer. Officer Cruz, Michael addressed the Latina officer, who had remained taciturn throughout the entire confrontation. Do you have children? Cruz nodded, her voice emerging as a whisper. I do. 2 sons. How old are they? 15 and 17. 15 and 17, Michael repeated. Nearly the same age as Darius. Tell me, how would you feel if your children were subjected to such treatment? Tears began to stream down Cruz's face. She looked at Darius, then at the scattered belongings, then back at Michael. I would be utterly devastated, she admitted. Devastated, Michael echoed, an intriguing choice of word. Because that is precisely what you have done to my nephew. You have devastated him. You have decimated the trust he held in the world, in justice, in human decency. Michael walked over to where Darius's belongings lay and began to meticulously gather them. Each movement was deliberate, imbued with respect. He folded the clothes, arranged the papers, handled each item as though it were precious. These are the possessions of a diligent young man, he said as he worked. Pay stubs, school uniform, books. Honestly earned money. He placed everything back into Darius's backpack with the meticulousness of someone who comprehends the intrinsic value of dignity. But you failed to perceive any of this, he continued. You saw what you wanted to see, what you were indoctrinated to see, what society conditioned you to perceive. Michael stood up and handed the backpack to Darius, who received it with trembling hands. My nephew came here to buy a gift for his mother, Michael said, his voice now laden with an emotion that transcended mere anger. His mother is a nurse. She works double shifts to sustain her family. She saves lives daily. He paused, allowing the gravity of the information to permeate. And this young man, this remarkable young man, toiled for months to save money to buy her a gift. Because he loves her. Because he respects her. Because he was raised to cherish family, diligence, and probity. Michael then turned his gaze back to Miss Whitmore. But you perceived none of this, did you? You merely observed the color of his skin and concluded he posed a threat. Ms. Whitmore attempted to speak, but only a choked sound escaped her throat. No, Michael raised his hand. Do not utter a word. Do not attempt to justify yourself. Do not endeavor to explain, for there is no conceivable explanation that could vindicate your actions. The store door swung open again, and a middle-aged man in an expensive suit hurried in. His name badge identified him as Mr. Reynolds, general manager. Mr. Jordan, he said, approaching swiftly, I'm James Reynolds, manager of this store. I apologize profusely for what transpired here. Michael scrutinized him with eyes that had learned to discern people's intentions in milliseconds. Mr. Reynolds, he replied, his voice perilously calm, your apologies are misdirected. It was my nephew who was humiliated in your store. Mr. Reynolds immediately turned to Darius, genuinely abashed. Young man, I am profoundly sorry for the treatment you received here. This does not reflect our company's values. It doesn't reflect them, Michael interjected, a new intensity entering his voice. Then explain to me, Mr. Reynolds. How did this happen? How could your employee have presumed my nephew was a criminal? How could she have called the police on a customer who had done nothing but ask to view a product? Mr. Reynolds looked at Ms. Whitmore, who appeared to wish to vanish entirely. There will be consequences, he promised. This cannot and will not happen again. Michael took a step toward the manager, and there was an almost predatory quality to his movements. Consequences, he repeated. What kind of consequences, Mr. Reynolds? A reprimand? A sensitivity course? A week's suspension? The manager swallowed hard, realizing he was being tested. Well, we need to follow protocols. Protocols, Michael cut in. Let me tell you something about protocols, Mr. Reynolds. When I was a child, the protocol was to keep us out of certain schools. When I was a teenager, the protocol was to shadow us in stores. When I was a young adult, the protocol was to question my rightful place on the teams I joined. His voice was escalating again, decades of frustration channeled into a singular, explosive moment. Your protocols are the reason my nephew was humiliated today. Your protocols are the reason he was treated like a criminal. Your protocols are racist, Mr. Reynolds, and if you can't see that, then you are part of the problem. The silence that followed was absolute. No one stirred. No one dared to breathe. Michael turned to look at each person in the store. Barnes, Cruz, Ms. Whitmore, Mr. Reynolds. And when he spoke again, his voice was lower, yet somehow more potent. Do you want to know what's ironic? He said. I shouldn't be here. I was en route to an important meeting, but I received a call from my sister, and there was something in her voice. Something that told me he needed me. He paused, looking at Darius with tenderness. And when I arrived here and saw what was transpiring, I witnessed something I had seen 1,000 times before. I witnessed a young black man being judged not by his actions, but by his appearance. I saw justice abrogated. I saw dignity trampled. Michael approached Darius and placed a hand on his shoulder. But I also witnessed something more. I saw a young man who, even while being humiliated, maintained his equanimity, who did not surrender his dignity, who did not stoop to the level of his accusers. Darius looked at his uncle, and there was pride in his eyes. You reminded me, Michael continued, of why I persevere in this struggle, why I continue striving to open doors, why I persist in trying to be an exemplar. He turned to face the group again. Because there are young men like Darius, young men who merit dignified treatment, young men who deserve to be judged by their character, not by their color. Michael's voice was laden with emotion now, decades of struggle encapsulated in a single moment of profound truth. And I swear by all that is sacred, he said, his voice gaining volume, that I will not cease fighting until no young black man has to endure what my nephew experienced today. Mr. Reynolds approached again, clearly disconcerted by the situation unfolding in his store. Mr. Jordan, he said, I would like to offer the watch as a gesture of goodwill, an apology for the egregious experience your nephew endured here. Michael contemplated the offer for a moment, then shook his head. No, he stated unequivocally. My nephew came here to purchase a gift with money he earned through honest labor. He will pay for it. His dignity is not for sale. The retort resonated like a visceral blow to all present. It was a profound lesson in pride, in integrity, in refusing to accept gratuities even when tendered as restitution. Darius smiled, perfectly comprehending his uncle's principled stance. He had toiled for that money, meticulously saved every cent, and envisioned that moment. Accepting the watch as a complimentary item would fundamentally diminish the significance of the gift. Mrs. Whitmore completed the wrapping of the watch, fashioning an elegant package befitting the special gift it was. She handed it to Darius with hands that still trembled slightly. "Thank you," Darius said courteously, accepting the parcel. Michael placed a hand on Darius's shoulder, a gesture of support and pride. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," Darius replied. But before they could depart, Michael turned back to the room one last time. "I'm calling the commissioner right now," he stated, pulling his phone from his pocket. "This isn't going to end here." And in that moment, with Michael Jordan standing centrally in the store, phone in hand, championing his nephew with the full weight of his legendary stature, everyone knew the world had shifted, that justice had arrived, that the giant had entered the fray, and nothing would ever be the same. Michael's threat was not an empty one, and everyone in the room knew it. When Michael Jordan spoke of calling the commissioner, it was no idle threat from an irate civilian. It was a promise from someone with genuine connections, authentic influence, and the resolve to wield both to ensure justice was served. Officer Barnes visibly paled. In his 15-year career, he had faced many trying situations, but he had never found himself in the position of having to account for his actions to one of America's most revered figures. "Mr. Jordan," Barnes said, his voice laden with barely concealed desperation. "Perhaps we can resolve this internally. There's no need to involve the commissioner." Michael paused mid-dial, his gaze fixing on the officer with an intensity that made Barnes involuntarily recoil. "No need," Michael repeated, his voice low and perilous. "My nephew was publicly humiliated, treated like a criminal, had his belongings searched without probable cause. And you believe there's no need to involve higher authorities?" Officer Cruz stepped forward, acutely aware that the situation was imperiling their careers. "Mr. Jordan," she said, her voice carefully modulated, "Officer Barnes is right. We can resolve this through the appropriate channels. There are protocols for situations like this." "Protocols," Michael repeated the word as if it were an expletive. "Like the protocols that allowed you to treat my nephew as a suspect in the first place?" Mr. Reynolds witnessed the strained interaction, perceiving the unfolding scenario as a burgeoning public relations catastrophe that threatened to irrevocably tarnish his establishment's standing. He carefully interceded. "Mr. Jordan," he interjected, "perhaps we can devise a solution amenable to all parties. Ms. Whitmore's conduct was patently improper, and repercussions must be addressed." "What sort of repercussions?" Michael queried pointedly. Mr. Reynolds glanced at Ms. Whitmore, who seemed to have visibly shrunk during the exchange. "Immediate termination," he stated unequivocally. "Your actions are anathema to our company's core values, and we have zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind." Ms. Whitmore parted her lips to protest, yet no sound materialized. She recognized she had sealed her own fate the instant she chose to prejudge Darius based on his skin color, rather than affording him the respect due a customer. "And what about the officers?" Michael inquired, his gaze shifting between Barnes and Cruz. Barnes interjected defensively. "Mr. Jordan, we were dispatched to a report of potential suspicious activity. It is incumbent upon us to investigate." "Investigate by all means," Michael cut him short, "but not to presume culpability, not to treat a minor as a suspect without substantiation, not to publicly humiliate a young man whose sole transgression was being black in an upscale establishment." The veracity of Michael's assertions was unassailable. Every individual in the room understood that the incident transcended standard procedure. It was prejudice laid bare. Darius observed everything in silence, clutching his mother's gift to his chest. He was learning a valuable lesson about wielding influence and power responsibly. His uncle wasn't just advocating for him, he was championing all young people who might face similar predicaments in the future. Mr. Reynolds' phone rang again. He swiftly answered, conversing in hushed tones, then rejoined the group, his expression even more perturbed. "Mr. Jordan," he stated, "the situation outside is intensifying. More journalists are converging, and a video has been uploaded to social media. It's rapidly gaining traction." Michael seemed unfazed. In the digital age, information proliferated with unprecedented velocity, particularly concerning public figures and racial dynamics. "What kind of video?" he inquired. "Someone filmed through the storefront window as the officers were searching your nephew's belongings," Mr. Reynolds explained. The video unequivocally depicts the situation, and people are responding with considerable fervor. Michael retrieved his personal device and expeditiously navigated to social media platforms. The video had already amassed thousands of views and hundreds of comments, the majority expressing profound indignation over the treatment meted out to Darius. "This is unraveling," Barnes murmured, acutely aware of the professional ramifications. "No," Michael retorted. "This is precisely where it needs to be, under public scrutiny, where everyone can see what truly transpired." Officer Cruz approached Michael, her expression somber. "Mr. Jordan," she said, "I acknowledge we made grave errors today. How can I make this right?" Michael regarded her for a moment. He detected a genuine quality in her inquiry, a sincerity conspicuously absent from Barnes's perfunctory apologies. "Officer Cruz," he said, "the question isn't how you can rectify the situation with me. It's how you can make it right for all the young individuals, like my nephew, who contend with this kind of treatment on a daily basis." "What do you propose?" "Training," Michael responded without hesitation. "Substantive training on implicit bias, on how to prevent assumptions from dictating actions, and accountability. Tangible consequences when officers act on prejudice rather than evidence." Their exchange was punctuated by the sound of further commotion outside the store. The mall security guard reappeared at the doorway, visibly perturbed. "Mr. Jordan," he said, "the police commissioner is here. He requested a personal audience with you." A strained silence enveloped the store. The commissioner's arrival signaled the official escalation of the situation to the highest echelons of police authority. "Send him in," Michael said with equanimity. Moments later, a middle-aged man in an impeccable uniform entered the store. Commissioner Patrick Murphy was renowned for his efforts to reform the Chicago Police Department, but equally for his straightforward approach to delicate situations. "Mr. Jordan," the commissioner said, offering his hand. "I'm Patrick Murphy. I profoundly regret that our acquaintance must begin under such circumstances." Michael clasped the outstretched hand, but his countenance remained unyielding. "Commissioner Murphy," he responded, his voice unwavering, "I trust your presence here extends beyond mere apologies." The commissioner nodded, his gaze swiftly sweeping the store. He took in Darius's possessions, still in disarray, and being rearranged, the discomfited stance of the officers and the crestfallen face of the sales associate behind the counter. "I'm here to ascertain precisely what transpired and ensure this never recurs," Murphy said. "I've already requested the CCTV footage and the store's dispatch log." Michael didn't avert his gaze. "The footage will show a black boy being treated like a criminal for trying to buy his mother a gift, without raising his voice, without committing any crime, simply for existing." Murphy swallowed hard. "That's precisely what concerns me. What if this boy weren't your nephew? What if he didn't have a recognizable surname?" The commissioner turned to Barnes and Cruz. "This question applies to you as well." Barnes lowered his gaze. Cruz nodded silently, her gaze fixed on Darius. Murphy continued, "We're implementing unconscious bias training, but it's not enough. What happened here isn't merely misconduct. It's a reflection of a culture that needs to be challenged and dismantled." Michael crossed his arms. "And will it be?" "It will. Not because of me. Because of him," Murphy replied, pointing to Darius. "Because he deserves to live in a country where a young black man can buy a gift without being escorted out by police officers." Darius looked at the commissioner, surprised to hear that coming from a police chief. For the first time that day, he felt that perhaps someone was truly listening. Murphy extended his hand to Darius. "Forgive me, son, for everything the system put you through today. I can't change what happened, but I can ensure there will be consequences." Darius hesitated for a second, and then shook the commissioner's hand. "I just don't want anyone else to go through what I did." Michael placed a hand on his nephew's shoulder. There was pride in his gaze, but also a silent responsibility. He knew that moment was bigger than the two of them. Murphy turned to the officers. "Effective immediately, you are suspended until the conclusion of the internal investigation. Internal affairs will take it from here." Cruz nodded, resigned. Barnes pursed his lips and remained silent. The store was silent, a heavy yet necessary silence. Justice was beginning to take its first steps. Michael looked at Darius, who held the small bag with the wrapped watch, with a care that none of the officers had demonstrated that day. "Let's go home," his uncle said, and with that, the two left the store, side by side, proud, dignified. But before crossing the threshold, Michael turned and left one last statement hanging in the air. "If my name was what prevented a tragedy today, it's because the world still has much to learn. Now let's go, son. You need to give your mother her present." Moments later, the sun was just beginning its descent as Darius alighted from the vehicle in front of the small red brick house on Chicago's South Side. The late afternoon's golden light glistened on the small bag he clutched with such meticulous care, as if it encapsulated the very essence of his journey within. Michael remained in the car, offering a mere nod. "Go on, champ," he said. Darius nodded, swallowed hard, and ascended the 2 steps to the porch. The door opened before he could even knock. Angela, his mother, was still clad in her blue hospital scrubs. Her weary eyes instantly brightened upon seeing her son. "Hi, my love. Is everything all right?" Darius did not respond immediately. Instead, he simply extended the small box, meticulously wrapped with gold ribbon. "Happy birthday, Mom." Angela hesitated. She looked at the gift, then at her son, her expression a mix of bewilderment, as if still grappling to comprehend the gesture. She took the wrapped parcel with exquisite delicacy, as if it were crafted from the most fragile glass. As she opened it and beheld the watch, a golden, classic, elegant timepiece, she brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. "Darius, I washed cars for half a year. I meticulously saved every single cent. You deserve far more than this, but it's the utmost I could manage." Angela laughed through her tears. "It's not just the watch, my son. It's what it symbolizes. It's a testament to everything you are." She pulled him into a fervent embrace, the kind of embrace that, without words, conveyed, "I see you. I love you. I believe in you." In that precise moment, nothing else mattered. Neither the police, nor the store, nor the prejudice. Only mother and son, and time, now irrevocably marked by a timepiece worth infinitely more than mere gold. If this narrative resonated with you, please leave a comment. Share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it, and of course, subscribe to the channel for more narratives that deeply move, profoundly inspire, and compel contemplation.